My dog in my house. We turn the radio on. Sitting back, yeah, top down.
Well, we've tarried on long enough, so without further ado, hi Jen, how you doing? In a matter of 2-3 weeks, Bruce, who's currently sitting outside looking like this, is going to look like this. Yum. Now, you've seen most of these parts before, but because it's been a few years since we started the restoration and placed the order, I want to refresh your memory and catch you up on where we are. I've laid out all the parts that we're going to be using for the next couple of days. Just like with Genevieve, we're going to get the car running and driving, and then we'll worry about all the finishing touches later. So that means we've got a lot of mechanical stuff, including electrical bits, ahead of us. This is a brand new K-Cam. It's made in the US of A, sold by VP Auto Parts. Attached to the cam is going to be the new timing gear. This is a fiber gear. Our lifter kit, 69 grams, performance lifters. These are also going to work in B18 engines. Our motor mounts, they're called rubber cushions with engine mounts, and the transmission mount is nearly identical to that. Some catalogs have them as exactly the same part number, some have them a little bit different. In my observation, there's a variation of almost ½ an inch between certain brands of engine mounts / transmission mounts, so I wouldn't be that concerned because this is an old car and some of those angles are not as precise or necessary as they are in modern cars. We've got lots of engines and lots of parts and boxes of stuff that came out, but we bought an engine from a 69 140, and that's the one that ended up getting rebuilt because it was the dirty engine, and the engine that I bought in San Diego a couple years ago when I made my first trip out to Orange County and then down south to San Diego is sitting there in the corner because I noticed that it was rebuilt. I think it's got 20 thousandths over pistons, and there's no reason to rebuild an engine that's already rebuilt, so we just took the dirtier B20 engine from the 140. So anyway, the point is they come with different cables. This is not the negative cable on these cars. The negative cables on these cars are this type of earth strap, and I have no idea why somebody would have fanned it out. I don't think you get more or less ground with it being fanned out like that because this is what they come like originally. This is a brand new part from VP Auto Parts as well. Everything from here is going to be VP unless otherwise stated. And this is also going to be the same kind of strap that the engine uses to the frame on the side right under the exhaust pipe or over the exhaust pipe. Transmission membrables. Okay, I also wised up and started labeling hardware because it's really important to have all of your hardware labeled and in the correct place so you don't spend time looking for bolts like I had to with Genevieve. There's a lot of that learning curve that's going to make Bruce a lot faster and therefore a lot more affordable of a restoration since you know what you're doing. The whole 2 cars back to back, it's stressful, but it's also got some good economy of scale in the sense that it will be a quicker, much more knowledgeable restoration for this car since I just did the engine on Genevieve and got the thing running in the last 2-3 weeks. Our generator bracket, you know, the original style here where it uses the cushions in and then it has a bolt on either side for the really heavy generator. It's being replaced with the SWEM alternator bracket. It's been painted red to match the block and it comes with a harness and 7 or 8 pages of information. We only need to buy the alternator. That's the only thing left there. For the cam, you've got the little bits and pieces, the Woodruff key, the thrust washer, very important that you don't lose those, and the gear nut that goes at the end, as well as this washer here, the retaining plate. Now we do have a new one, 75 foot-pounds with blue Loctite is what some people recommend because 100 foot-pounds is what the factory recommended, as I mentioned in earlier videos with Genevieve, and some people apparently tended to snap the heads off of these things, so that's why they required the lower torque rating. For the fuel pump, I've got a whole box of glass fuel pumps, about 12 to 15 of them, so I'm not going to be rebuilding them at this time. I'm just going to stick on a regular fuel pump that looks to be in pretty good shape. This is an aftermarket one, and it may be a good idea to put a fuel pressure regulator on aftermarket pumps because sometimes, as I've experienced in the past, they tend to pump really high on pressure. They shouldn't. They should be metered at a certain amount, but sometimes they do that. As I also mentioned in earlier videos, the flame trap on the B20s does not require a PCV valve. This is one that we pulled off of one of those two engines here, and it uses a PCV valve in place. The only thing that makes me think that you should use a PCV valve is because the diameter of this is a little bit different than the diameter of this, which goes into the nipple on the intake manifold. And again, not necessary, but people are doing this. There are two styles of waterline that I'm discovering with these two B20s. I think this one is from the 140 because they needed their hoses in a different place, but all the 122s have just a simple... On the backside of the head are these little fellers here. You can see that they're kind of in various levels of decay, depending on how the car has been serviced or what sort of water / coolant they used. This one seems to be our best candidate for cleaning up and restoring. With some of this stuff, if it could be cleaned up and used just fine, then there's no reason for me to replace it. I think it's $20 for a new one of these. However, I have in the past gotten away with making my own just using plumbing parts from Lowe's. So when I found this, it reminded me of that. This was probably in a box of parts somewhere. You know, regular 3/8 pipe fitting. It's slightly flared up so that it does tighten as it seals in place. I don't use any sealers with this. I don't use any Teflon tape or anything like that. And then just add a little adapter for the side and clamp the hose on. This hose is actually kind of stuck on here, and it's a little rusty too. Not an ideal solution, but in a tight spot, it'll get you going. Still has a little bit of rust that's kind of formed in and around, and then this lower pipe here looks rusty at the end as well. That's why I like to use a little bit of silicone grease, a non-petroleum based grease, to help those hoses prevent rusting and prevent seizing. You can, however, buy new water pipes for the bottom and the top, and this is what they look like, nice and new. They can be cleaned up just as well. Some of these are black, some of these are red. I've seen both offered. The funny thing about these is the B18 and B20s use the larger opening. I think it's a 1-inch opening. Maybe the early B18s or just the B16s used the smaller opening. And well, I have, like I was talking about hoarding, I just have a whole bunch of those early styles. You can see the size difference in the hole there. Anyway, I don't know why anybody felt the need to collect all of these, especially if they are the small one. So, anyway, that's just amusing to me to have this much extra stuff. This is the dipstick for the Borg Warner 35. It's basically a big spring-loaded disc that goes for the automatic transmissions. It was a 3-speed or 2-speed? I think a 3-speed automatic that was just garbage. Cooling fans for the B18s are 4-blade style. I don't know if the early B20s had a 4-blade on the Amazon and then went to a 5-blade with the 140s. Genevieve's got a 5-blade fan. It's bigger, it's gonna pull a lot of air through, and these are not really ideal for hot climates. I think all of them have spacers. The one on Genevieve has a spacer, this one has a spacer, and this one has the markings of a spacer, those 4. It's not a complete circle where it would sit on the water pump pulley. And as we look here on the pulley, we can see also a square pattern as well. BP Auto Parts does offer new hardware kits like the mounting for the distributor here, where you can get all 3 of these bolts with the new washers. It's well worth the price. I think it's like $1 and change for just those little pieces there. And it really improves the overall look of the fit and finish of everything. The rear main seal has a couple of options. You can have the old style felt seal, which uses a retainer plate and a spring like this, much like the front main seals used to before we upgraded those to neoprene. The neoprene on the rears can leak quite a bit if you don't get it in just right. This one looks like it's just barely over flush with the entire surface here. You don't want it to recess in too much, of course. This one here also takes a neoprene seal. You can see the lip here, but there's a little bit of a gap where they didn't go all the way up to that lip down there. So that tells me that it was probably the same thing where it's flush with the surface. And a third one that shows a different style. This is the one that's stamped Volvo, and these two are probably aftermarket, but they do vary in design, where this one has just 3 little nubs all around it, which are kind of the seal retainers. But it's also a neoprene style seal. This is the sleeve for the front of the crankshaft. The front crankshaft bolt. There is a very interesting double style. If you're going to be running the York compressor or any sort of air conditioning and you want the double pulley style, it's really kind of interesting the way they did that. It's essentially 2 single pulleys. Well, of course, the shapes are different. You know, you can't just stack 2 pulleys on top of each other. And then there's this big retainer sleeve in the center, which has the pin to keep them right on point. And this is from a B20. This is from that 69 140. That is the 140 that was featured on my YouTube channel for having the turbocharged carburetors. Something I learned recently about the distributors is the shaft on the bottom, where this piece is actually offset, and so is the cutout here on the drive gear. It's not centered, so it does only go one way. You can't just lift this up, rotate it 180, or rotate the rotor 180 and then stick it back down. It actually you have to pull this out and then reorient it. So that's why I had my distributor off 180 degrees on Genevieve, because I thought it was more or less the same, and it ended up being asymmetrical. Front main seals with the covers. Also, no groove in there for the old style felt rings and retainers. And there's the neoprene seal as well. I'm going to keep this around just to make sure that our new seal is exactly the same size. We don't want any differences in size. And here's another style. I believe these two are... Here's another neoprene style. This one has an oil drain on the front. This one has an oil drain on the back side past the first retaining lip. Between the two of them, I'm more inclined to go with this. This matches the IPD style of the one that we put on Genevieve. They did have that aftermarket cover. And it looks like it'll be a little easier to clean up, being the less dirty of the two. Other distributors, miscellaneous parts, and all the fan motors with the aged, broken, and dried out plastic. Right here are some zinc-plated parts, and the battery tray here has been powder coated. Not battery tray, this is the battery retainer. Powder coating is kind of neat. It leaves a little bit of an orange peeling on some of the imperfect surfaces, but this is the show side here that you do see. I like that effect. And we had a lot of parts powder coated. There's the pedals up there, the glove box, the front pedal, all the seat brackets that are black have been powder coated as well. The zinc plating on these door strikers are actually, it was a really good idea, because cleaning them up with a wire brush isn't really ideal, so the zinc plating just looks gorgeous. And I forgot to put in one of these guys with the batch of zinc plated stuff, but it's still free spinning. And then the other side here has been plated. Right there is the pulley for the air conditioning style B20s that bolts in through the head bolts, which are those 2 long bolts that you see there, and it's not really an ideal setup. Here's the radiator. It's a known good radiator. It was in the car when we removed it. Yeah, this is the San Diego radiator from that B20. It was a 68 122 wagon, so it had a lot of interesting stuff like headrests, different visors, a different rear view mirror, etc. The dash pad. Something interesting to note is that the bushing styles are different on these B20 radiators than they are on the B18s, but the part number for the bushings or grommets sold for the B18 radiators are the same ones that the catalog shows as the B20, but they are distinctly different. 673989 are the bushings here. That would be these guys here on the left. We got England stamped on them. And then the catalog is showing that this B18 style is also the right one for the B20s. It's not really correct. You can see the hole sizes are the same. There's a little sleeve that goes inside of here, and then the bolt kind of cinches that up, and the bushing keeps the vibrations to a minimum. And this will work just fine, but it's not exactly the right one. This is the right one. Just an interesting little tidbit that you guys might benefit from knowing. Don't be alarmed that some of the copper is showing through these veins. They do brush off kind of easily, so anytime that there's contact made with the cooling fins, it will show the copper underneath. So I'm going to repaint this as well. It's going to look good as new. And funny thing is, it's copper on the center. I don't know if the cooling channels are brass or not, but then the inlet and outlet pipes are brass, and I'm sure the end caps are brass. And then these guys, I believe, are steel that hold that hold the expansion tank and the brackets on the side. So very interesting amalgamation of 3 different materials at least. All right, onto the head. See what I was talking about, how worn out that is? Oh my goodness, it's disgusting. There's our head. It's got the new valve springs, new valves, retainers, seals. That's how it looks on the backside, and we'll probably use a big circular filter on the inside there. I thought that was an interesting piece that we inherited with our boxes of parts, but I don't know if I'll be using it. I might just go with a regular round air filter, something pretty and traditional. Here's a few stickers that important labels for the air filters, the electrical system, etc. These are, what are they, phenolic spacers? Spacers for the carburetors. These keep a lot of the heat off of the carb body from the intake and exhaust manifolds being so close together, and it will prevent you from having hot start issues where the fuel will evaporate in the carburetor and it won't be able to spray into the car, so you'll have a hard time starting it with a hot engine. And this is an oil cap that looks like the screen inside has been removed, since you can see all the way through. There is like a wire mesh in here. It's not unlike the one that lives in the flame trap. An interesting little heat shield is this fella here. Not exactly sure what lives right there that is finding this, that makes this necessary, but the more common style of heat shield is just this one right here. This is what we've got on Bruce. The SU carburetors, this is the SU HS6. These are the carbies from the 69-140. They were working, they are good. They're gonna get spruced up with KD needles. We do have the rebuild kit here. New shafts, springs, all the O-rings, fuel lines, and gaskets, throttle plates, and hardware that you could need. Good old Skinner's Union. All right, and thermostat. 84 Celsius. You don't want that in your teacup. Down below, the clutch, bell housing, all that stuff. Our oil pan with a magnetic drain plug and miscellaneous engine bits and pieces, hardware. One of my favorite things from VP for the sedans and the coupes, they give you a gas tank, brand new. The wagons do not. Thankfully, this gas tank had 0 rust in it, and we were able to reuse it after repainting it. But this gas tank, nice. And new gaskets, new cap. One of my favorite things about the cap is that it has Volvo on the top here. It's not an aftermarket cap. And even cooler, has Volvo right on the keys. I like that. Our cork gasket for the sealing of the level sending unit. And what I'm going to show you in this box is going to frighten a lot of you, but to me it is my favorite thing about these cars. It requires the least amount of work, the most amount of brain power, and it is so satisfying when you get this kind of thing working. You ready? Oh, I love wiring harnesses. This is going to be a real challenge. This one's slightly different from the one in Genevieve because it's for the earlier cars. And a brand new fuse box. This one even comes with light bulbs installed. That's really nice of them. These are parts that I'm finished with, like the camshafts for all 3 engines, things that I might sell or keep as spares. Those are all neatly organized in one box. Speaking of other inherited parts, these are brake shoes that were purchased for $18. I'm almost sure that these are going to have asbestos. As best as I know. Polyurethane bushings from IPD for the sway bar end links. This car does have a front IPD sway bar. Brake drums. They are brand new in the baggies that are falling apart and slightly rusty. It doesn't rain much in Southern California, especially in the desert of Salton City, which is where this car and all of its boxes lived in storage. But it, on occasion, will get wet. Exhaust gaskets, really nice ones too. This is the really nice, like, multi-layer steel. Very cool. Here's our brand new water pump. Still good to go. A little surface rust on the end. Water pump seals, interesting style. Probably rubber. We've got new ones. I don't know if I trust 30-year-old seals. I'll trust a 30-year-old pump, but I don't know if I'll trust 30-year-old rubber. Here's the pilot bearings for the transmission, a hydraulic wheel cylinder that actually seems to be in very good shape. This is preserved well in its box and still has a lot of pliability and squish to it, which is nice. That's what I like to see. It shows that nothing's seized up inside from any surface rust. However, there's only one. Oh yeah, and then check this out. Auto lights, probably also from the late 90s or early 2000s. Anyway, let's try to wrap this up. I've gone on much too long. Box of new parts here, stuff that's going to get put on in the future. Little trim finishing pieces, gold letters, the reflector stickers for the doors, lock knobs, little bits. And then here is stuff that's going to go on now. Fuel lines, door striker gaskets, radiator caps, the boot for stuff, the steering shaft foam, because you don't want to put this on after you've got your wheel installed and everything else. You don't want to tear it, so it's just going to stretch right through there. A sending unit for the fuel gauge, and then the rubber plugs that live on the side of the car. I don't know why these ones are black instead of the yellow plastic. Probably just an early model year thing. Anyway, clutch master and slave with 8 rebuild kits that came with the inherited parts. This is an extra hood latch that came from the sandblasters. It was unpainted. It was sprayed with WD-40 to prevent it from rusting. Speaking of WD-40, also what I sprayed this front nose piece with because it's unpainted. It's got a few dings and dents in it, but overall it's a good candidate for somebody else to use. It'll be up for sale. The shifter, the shift knob, it's an oldie but a goodie. Lots of baggies of hardware and parts there. This is the early style turn signals for the rear. They are all red and they only have 2 bulbs versus the 3 style that has the reverse light and then an amber or sometimes a red blinker. You can get lenses for these, you can get gaskets for them, but you can't get this metal backing plate for them. And that is the reason why I'm not using them, because I only have one and you can't find another. Up there are the grills for the early B16 style nose, all the way through 1962, the very last year of the B16, the very first year of the B18, and beautiful, beautiful red upholstery. This was custom made because we have only the later style seat frames and they don't fit the early style seats. So we had to have essentially the later style adapted to the early style. So this is how it'll clip down over. It's going to look really, really nice. I mean, it already looks really nice. Stuff that's going to get put on later, finishing trim, seat brackets, etc., bumpers, old bumpers. All the new bumpers are here in the corner. Some parts for Genevieve, some parts for Bruce, engine bits. Here are some more zinc-plated pieces. This was door limiters and the strikers. That's for a BMW. There's our powder-coated front axle. And our rear axle is down here. There's the M41 transmission, the J-type overdrive. Needs a rebuild because it's got some bearing whine, but it's there. And our beautiful wiring harness. Lots of good stuff on this one. And a couple of add-ons like a tachometer and the hazard switch. So I'm really curious to see how that was done and what we can do. Because I like the idea of having hazards. Many a time on Arthur, I would just have to drive with a turn signal on the shoulder because I didn't have working hazards. So that was the closest thing you can do, is just let people know that you're needing some help. 544, or maybe even 444, or maybe even both window frames. I don't know how I got a hold of those. But funny thing is I sold them to a guy down in Central America, and then the package got returned and never reached out for a refund or anything. So it was really interesting. It's like they just disappeared. Our exhaust pipe. Yum. Yum. Oh yeah, there's an extra B20A head. And lots of extra parts for cars. You just can't get away from these stinking Weber parts, man. And my favorite little bit here, the rear handle. It's gorgeous and it's unrestored. And, oh good, that's just dust. Assembling this is gonna be a lot of fun. The York style compressor, a couple of generators, boxes of brake rotors, 7 starters. That's a heavy little box there. And an M40 transmission. There's just so much to these cars in my garage, and, well, we've tarried on long enough, so without further ado, hi Jen, how you doing? In a matter of 2-3 weeks, Bruce, who's currently sitting outside looking like this, is going to look like this. Yum. Anyway, it was fun to show you all my boxes, but all this stuff on my workbenches and just scattered around, it's giving me anxiety, so I can't wait to get started and clean up. So bye-bye, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and leave your thumbs up so that other people can see this video and I can help the whole world with all this information on obscure 60s Swedish cars. But you know what? If you love them, you know.